Wilbur Wright was an Ohio inventor and a complex figure who became one of the most revolutionary pioneers of human flight. Wilbur Wright, aviation pioneer and entrepreneur, was born in Millville, Indiana on April 16, 1867. He came from a close-knit family. He had a distinctive appearance with his sharp features and penetrating gaze. Wilbur's early years were marked by intellectual curiosity and mechanical aptitude. He attended high school in Richmond, Indiana, excelling in his studies and showing particular talent in mathematics and science, though he never received a formal diploma due to the family's move back to Dayton, Ohio in 1884. His education, though incomplete by conventional standards, shaped his understanding of mechanics and engineering, though his later achievements would test those foundations in the most extraordinary ways imaginable. After returning to Dayton, Wilbur planned to attend Yale University, but a hockey accident in the winter of 1886 changed the trajectory of his life. He was struck in the face during a game, losing several teeth and suffering injuries that left him depressed and reclusive for several years. During this period of recovery, Wilbur cared for his mother, Susan, who was dying of tuberculosis. He spent his time reading voraciously, consuming books from his father's extensive library. This period of forced introspection and study would prove formative, developing his analytical mind and his approach to problem solving. In 1889, Wilbur and his younger brother Orville started their first business venture together. They began publishing a weekly newspaper called the West Side News, with Wilbur as editor and Orville as publisher. The brothers worked well together, complementing each other's strengths. Wilbur was the more contemplative and theoretical thinker, while Orville was more hands-on and mechanically inclined. The newspaper business was modest but gave them experience in running an enterprise and working with machinery, particularly the printing press. By 1892, the brothers had caught the bicycle craze that was sweeping America. They opened the Wright Cycle Exchange, selling and repairing bicycles. The business was successful enough that they soon began manufacturing their own bicycle designs. The Wright Cycle Company, as it became known, provided the brothers with a steady income and, more importantly, practical experience in mechanical design and manufacturing. They learned about balance, control, and the importance of lightweight but strong construction, lessons that would prove invaluable in their future endeavors. The brothers' interest in flight was sparked in 1896 when they read about the death of Otto Lilienthal, a German aviation pioneer who had been killed in a glider crash. The news fascinated them, and they began reading everything they could find about aeronautics. Wilbur wrote to the Smithsonian Institution requesting information and received pamphlets and a list of books on the subject. The brothers immersed themselves in the existing literature on flight, studying the work of Lilienthal, Octave Chanute, and Samuel Langley. What distinguished the Wright brothers from other aviation experimenters was their systematic, methodical approach to the problem of flight. While others focused primarily on engines and power, Wilbur recognized that the fundamental problem was control. Birds didn't just fly, they controlled their flight, turning, banking, and adjusting to wind conditions. Wilbur became convinced that solving the control problem was the key to successful human flight. In 1899, Wilbur developed the concept of wing warping, a method of twisting the wings to control the aircraft's roll. The idea came to him while idly twisting along in a tube box in the bicycle shop. He realized that by warping or twisting the wings, a pilot could maintain balance and control the aircraft's movement. He built a small biplane kite to test the concept, and it worked. This breakthrough in control methodology would prove to be one of the Wright brothers' most important contributions to aviation. In 1900, the brothers built their first full-scale glider and traveled to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina to test it. They chose Kitty Hawk based on information from the U.S. Weather Bureau indicating it had strong, steady winds and soft sand for landings. The isolated location also provided privacy for their experiments. That first season was challenging. The glider didn't perform as well as their calculations had predicted, and they returned to Dayton disappointed but determined to understand why. The brothers returned to Kitty Hawk in 1901 with a larger glider. Again, the results were disappointing. The glider was difficult to control and didn't generate the lift they had calculated based on existing aeronautical data. Wilbur was deeply frustrated. He reportedly told Orville that man would not fly for 50 years. However, rather than giving up, the brothers decided that the existing data on air pressure and wing shapes must be wrong. Back in Dayton, Wilbur and Orville built a wind tunnel in their bicycle shop. This was a crucial decision that demonstrated their scientific approach to the problem of flight. Over the winter of 1901 to 1902, they tested over 200 different wing shapes and configurations in their wind tunnel. They methodically recorded data on lift, drag, and air pressure. This painstaking research allowed them to develop their own tables of aerodynamic data, far more accurate than anything that had existed before. Armed with this new data, the brothers built their 1902 glider. This aircraft incorporated all of their innovations: wing warping for roll control, a forward elevator for pitch control, and now a movable rear rudder for your control. They returned to Kitty Hawk in the fall of 1902, and this time their glider performed beautifully. They made hundreds of successful flights, some covering distances of over 600 feet. They had solved the control problem. They could now bank, turn, and maneuver their glider with precision. It was a monumental achievement, though the world barely noticed. With the control problem solved, the brothers turned their attention to powered flight. They needed an engine, but existing automobile engines were too heavy for their purposes. They designed their own lightweight engine with the help of their bicycle shop mechanic, Charlie Taylor. The engine produced about 12 horsepower, enough to power their aircraft. They also designed and built their own propellers, treating them as rotary wings and applying their aerodynamic research to create highly efficient designs. In the fall of 1903, the brothers returned to Kitty Hawk with their powered aircraft, the Wright Flyer. The machine had a wingspan of just over 40 feet and weighed about 600 pounds with the pilot. The brothers planned to launch it from a rail system they had devised, with the aircraft taking off into the wind. Weather delays and mechanical problems postponed their attempts through November and early December. On December 14, 1903, they were ready to try. They flipped a coin to see who would pilot the first attempt. Wilbur won. He climbed onto the lower wing, lying prone in the hip cradle that controlled the wing warping. The engine roared to life, and the flyer moved down the launching rail. But Wilbur pulled up too steeply, the aircraft stalled, and it settled back to the ground after only 3.5 seconds in the air. The flight covered about 100 feet but was not considered successful because the aircraft had not maintained sustained flight. 3 days later, on December 17, 1903, conditions were right for another attempt. It was Orville's turn to pilot. At 10:35 in the morning, with Wilbur running alongside to steady the wing, the flyer lifted off from the launching rail and flew for 12 seconds, covering 120 feet. It was a short flight, but it was controlled and sustained. The Wright brothers had achieved powered, controlled, heavier-than-air flight for the first time in human history. They made 3 more flights that day. Wilbur piloted the fourth and longest flight, staying aloft for 59 seconds and covering 852 feet. After that flight, a gust of wind caught the flyer and tumbled it across the sand, damaging it beyond repair for that season. The brothers packed up and returned to Dayton. They had accomplished what they set out to do, but their achievement was met with skepticism and indifference. Newspapers barely reported the story, and those that did were often dismissive or inaccurate. The brothers returned to Dayton and continued their work in relative obscurity. In 1904 and 1905, they built improved versions of their aircraft and flew them in a pasture near Dayton called Huffman Prairie. They developed the ability to make longer flights, to turn in circles, and to fly figure eights. By 1905, their Flyer 3 could stay aloft for over half an hour and cover distances of 24 miles. They had moved far beyond the brief hop at Kitty Hawk to practical, sustained flight. Yet still the world paid little attention. The brothers were secretive about their work, refusing to make public demonstrations without contracts or patent protection. They had applied for a patent on their control system in 1903, but it would not be granted until 1906. They were also trying to interest governments and private investors in their invention, but found few takers. The US Army showed some interest but demanded a demonstration before committing to a contract. The British government was similarly cautious. The brothers' secretiveness, while understandable from a business perspective, contributed to widespread skepticism about their claims. Many people simply didn't believe they had flown. Some thought the reports were hoaxes. Others believed the Wrights might have managed brief glides but nothing more. The fact that the brothers stopped flying altogether in 1906 and 1907 while they pursued business negotiations only deepened the skepticism. The situation began to change in 1908. The brothers finally secured contracts, one with the US Army and another with a French syndicate. The contracts required public demonstrations. Wilbur traveled to France while Orville remained in the United States to fulfill the Army contract. It was in France that the Wright brothers finally received the recognition they deserved. Wilbur's demonstrations at the Hunaudiers racecourse near Le Mans in August 1908 stunned the European aviation community. While Europeans had been making their own progress in aviation, particularly in France, no one could match the Wright brothers' level of control. Wilbur flew circles around the field, making graceful turns and banking maneuvers that left spectators amazed. The French press, which had been skeptical and even mocking of the Wright brothers' claims, now hailed Wilbur as a genius. He became a celebrity in France, faked by society and honored by the government. Meanwhile, Orville was conducting demonstrations at Fort Myer, Virginia for the US Army. His flights were equally impressive, and it seemed the brothers were on the verge of commercial success. But on September 17, 1908, tragedy struck. During a demonstration flight with Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge as a passenger, a propeller split and the aircraft crashed. Selfridge was killed, becoming the first person to die in an airplane crash. Orville was seriously injured, suffering a fractured hip and leg and several broken ribs. The crash was devastating for Wilbur, who was in France when he received the news. He was racked with guilt and worry about his brother. Orville recovered slowly, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Despite the tragedy, the Army contract was eventually fulfilled in 1909, with Orville completing the required demonstration flights after his recovery. The years 1909 and 1910 marked the peak of the Wright brothers' public recognition. They formed the Wright Company to manufacture aircraft and train pilots. They gave demonstrations around the world. Wilbur flew before huge crowds in New York Harbor as part of the Hudson-Fulton celebration in 1909. The brothers were awarded medals, honored by governments, and celebrated as heroes. They had achieved the fame their invention deserved, though it had taken years to arrive. However, success brought new challenges. The Wright brothers found themselves embroiled in patent litigation. Their 1906 patent covered their system of control, specifically wing warping. They believed anyone who used similar control methods was infringing on their patent. They sued numerous aviators and aircraft manufacturers, both in the United States and abroad. The most notable case was against Glenn Curtiss, a rival aviator and manufacturer who used ailerons instead of wing warping but achieved similar control results. The patent battles consumed enormous amounts of time, energy, and money. Wilbur, in particular, became obsessed with defending their patent rights. He spent countless hours on legal matters, traveling to give depositions and attending court proceedings. He felt that they had invented the airplane and deserved credit and compensation for their work. Others saw the Wrights as monopolists trying to stifle competition and progress in aviation. The stress of the patent fights took a toll on Wilbur. He was also frustrated by the direction aviation was taking. The brothers had envisioned the airplane as a tool for science and peaceful purposes, but it was increasingly being developed for military applications. European nations were building military aircraft, and aerial warfare seemed inevitable. The romance of flight was giving way to the reality of its destructive potential. In the spring of 1912, Wilbur contracted typhoid fever, likely from contaminated water or food. He had been in Boston on business and returned to Dayton feeling ill. His condition deteriorated rapidly. Despite the best medical care available, he grew weaker. The disease ravaged his body, causing high fever and delirium. Orville and their sister Catherine kept vigil at his bedside. On May 30, 1912, Wilbur Wright died at his family home in Dayton, Ohio. He was 45 years old. His death shocked the aviation community and the nation. Tributes poured in from around the world. The man who had given humanity the gift of flight was gone, less than 9 years after that first flight at Kitty Hawk. Wilbur's funeral was held at the First Presbyterian Church in Dayton. Thousands attended, including many of the pioneers of aviation. He was buried in the family plot at Woodland Cemetery in Dayton. In death, as in life, Wilbur was remembered with respect and admiration, though also with some controversy due to the patent battles. Wilbur's legacy is profound and enduring. He, along with his brother Orville, solved the problem of human flight through systematic experimentation, careful observation, and brilliant engineering. Their achievement changed the world, making possible everything from commercial air travel to space exploration. The methodology they developed, treating flight as an engineering problem to be solved through research and testing, became the foundation of aerospace engineering. Modern historians recognize Wilbur as the intellectual leader of the Wright brothers' partnership. While both brothers contributed to their success, Wilbur was the primary theorist and strategist. He was the one who first became obsessed with flight, who developed the wing warping concept, who conducted much of the correspondence with other researchers. His analytical mind and systematic approach were crucial to their success. Yet Wilbur's legacy is also complicated by the patent wars. Some historians argue that the brothers' aggressive litigation slowed the development of American aviation, driving innovation to Europe where patent enforcement was less stringent. Others defend the Wrights' right to protect their invention and profit from their work. The debate continues, reflecting broader questions about intellectual property and innovation. Perhaps the most fitting assessment of Wilbur Wright is that he was a man of extraordinary vision and determination who accomplished something that had eluded humanity for millennia. He saw a problem, the problem of human flight, and refused to accept that it was unsolvable. He approached it methodically, scientifically, and creatively. He succeeded where countless others had failed. Wilbur represents a particular type of inventor, the systematic experimenter who combines theoretical knowledge with practical skill. He was not a trained engineer or scientist, but a self-taught mechanic and bicycle manufacturer who applied scientific methods to an age-old dream. His success demonstrated that revolutionary breakthroughs could come from outside established institutions. In the end, Wilbur Wright was neither simply an inventor nor simply a businessman, but rather a complex figure who changed the course of human history. His legacy includes both the triumph of flight and the complications of commercializing that achievement. He is remembered today primarily for those 12 seconds at Kitty Hawk, though his contributions extended far beyond that single moment. He gave humanity wings, and in doing so, he transformed the world in ways that continue to unfold more than a century after his death. Wilbur was, even in death, a man who had reached beyond the possible, remembered for making the dream of flight a reality through intelligence, persistence, and an unwavering belief that humans could soar.